In the book The History of the Mongol Empire by John Mann, Chapter 1 The Rise of Genghis Khan introduces readers to Temujin, later known as Genghis Khan, a young boy born in 1162 CE into an impoverished family living on Mongolia's eastern steppes. Despite his humble beginnings and difficult childhood, he would eventually become one of history's most powerful rulers. Through sheer determination and ambition, Temujin rose from obscurity to unite all nomadic tribes under his rule, creating what is now known as the Mongol Empire. He was able to do this through military prowess combined with political savvy, forging alliances between rival clans while also crushing those who opposed him without mercy or hesitation when necessary. His success can be attributed not only to these qualities but also due diligence in learning about other cultures, which allowed him greater insight into how best manipulate them for maximum benefit during negotiations or warfare alike. In 1206, Genghis Khan was proclaimed ruler of the Mongol Empire. He quickly set about expanding his empire by conquering neighboring territories and establishing a powerful military force to protect it from outside threats. The Mongols were renowned for their skill in warfare and used innovative tactics such as feigned retreats, psychological warfare, surprise attacks and rapid mobility to defeat larger armies with fewer casualties than traditional methods would have allowed them. They also employed siege engines like catapults or trebuchets, which could hurl large stones at enemy fortifications while they advanced on foot towards cities under attack. Genghis Khan's successors continued this policy of expansion until the death of Kublai Khan in 1294, when he had conquered much of China including Beijing, then known as Dadu. After that time there was an interregnum period during which several different Khans ruled over various parts of Mongolia before Tamerlane unified all its disparate tribes into one nation again in 1368 AD, following a series of successful campaigns against rival empires such as those belonging to Timurids or Golden Horde Tatars who threatened Mongolian sovereignty throughout Central Asia. Under Timur's rule, the Mongol Empire reached its greatest extent, stretching across most modern-day countries between Russia and India, but eventually declined due largely to internal strife amongst competing factions within the ruling family itself, leading up eventual dissolution in 1635 AD after centuries' domination over vast swathes of Eurasia. Chapter 3 of the History of the Mongol Empire by John Mann focuses on how Genghis Khan and his successors created a vast empire that stretched from China to Europe. It begins with an overview of the early life and rise to power of Genghis Khan, including his unification efforts in Mongolia as well as campaigns against rival tribes such as the Naimans. After consolidating control over much of Central Asia, he launched invasions into northern China, which resulted in large-scale destruction but also brought about significant cultural exchange between East and West. This chapter then goes on to discuss some key aspects related to this period: military tactics used by Mongols, their administrative system based around yam, postal stations, religious tolerance practiced under them, economic policies implemented during their rule, etc. Finally, it looks at how, after deathbed instructions were given for succession plans within family lines, divisions began appearing among different branches, leading ultimately towards decline despite attempts made later by Kublai Khan's Yuan dynasty ruling from Beijing. Chapter 4 of the History of the Mongol Empire by John Mann focuses on how Genghis Khan and his successors left a lasting legacy. After unifying much of Asia, they created an efficient system for governing their vast empire that included taxation systems, postal services, religious tolerance, and diplomatic relations with other countries. They also established trade routes across Eurasia, which allowed goods to be exchanged between East and West more easily than ever before. In addition to this economic impact, the Mongols had a significant cultural influence as well. Many aspects such as art styles were adopted from conquered peoples, while others like language spread throughout Central Asia due to intermarriage among different ethnic groups under Mongol rule. Finally, it is argued that despite its eventual decline in power after Kublai Khan's death in 1294 CE, the Mongol Empire still has an important place in world history today because it was one of few empires able to successfully conquer so large an area without relying solely on military might or technological superiority, instead using diplomacy when possible alongside strategic alliances formed through marriage ties amongst ruling families. Chapter 5 of the History of the Mongol Empire by John Mann focuses on how the Mongols established their rule in China. After Genghis Khan's death, his son Ogedai became Great Khan and continued to expand into Central Asia and Eastern Europe. In 1211, he launched a massive invasion against Jin dynasty China, which was then divided between two rival states, Northern Song, in northern China, and Southern Song, in southern China. By 1234, all Chinese resistance had been crushed as well as much of Korea, however some pockets remained until after Kublai Khan took power in 1260. Under Kublai's reign from 1280 to 1294 there were major changes made to government structure, including introducing paper money for taxation purposes instead of coins or goods like silk or tea that had previously been used. He also created an imperial examination system based off Confucian principles so people could be appointed according to merit rather than family connections alone. This helped create more efficient bureaucracy within the empire, but it did not last long due largely because many powerful families still held sway over appointments even if they weren't necessarily qualified candidates themselves. Finally, during this period Buddhism began gaining popularity among both rulers and commoners alike, with Tibetan lamas becoming increasingly influential at court, while new sects such as Pure Land flourished throughout society, providing spiritual guidance for those seeking solace amidst turbulent times. Chapter 6 of the History of the Mongol Empire by John Mann focuses on how Genghis Khan and his successors created a vast empire in Central Asia. It begins with an overview of the geography, climate, and resources that made it possible for them to conquer such a large area. Then it looks at how they used their military might to expand their territory from Mongolia into China, Persia, modern-day Iran, Russia, India, and beyond. Finally, it examines some key aspects of life under Mongol rule, including taxation systems, religious tolerance, trade networks, diplomatic relations between different peoples within the empire as well as those outside its borders, cultural exchange among various ethnic groups living there during this period in history. In conclusion, Chapter 6 highlights just what an impressive feat was accomplished by these nomadic warriors who managed to create one unified state out many disparate parts, something which had never been done before or since then until modern times. In Chapter 7 of the History of the Mongol Empire by John Mann, the focus is on how Genghis Khan and his successors established their rule in Middle Eastern lands. After conquering much of Central Asia, they moved into Persia, modern-day Iran, where they encountered a powerful enemy, the Khwarezmian dynasty. Despite initial successes against them, it was not until 1220 that Chagatai Khan's forces were able to defeat this formidable foe and take control over most parts of modern-day Iraq and Afghanistan, as well as some areas further east such as Azerbaijan. This victory allowed for an expansion southwards towards Syria, which saw cities like Aleppo fall under Mongol domination in 1260, while other regions including Palestine also came under their sway during this period. In addition to military conquest, there were also diplomatic efforts made with various Muslim rulers who sought alliances or at least peaceful coexistence with these new overlords from Mongolia. One example being Sultan al-Kamil's agreement to pay tribute after negotiations between him and Hulagu Khan failed due to religious differences between Christianity and Islam respectively. The Mongols' presence had far-reaching consequences for both politics and culture within these territories. Many local dynasties either submitted willingly or through force, whilst others chose resistance but ultimately succumbed too late when faced with overwhelming odds stacked against them militarily speaking. Meanwhile, Islamic scholars found themselves having access previously denied, thanks largely to its newfound status quo whereby different religions could exist side by side without fear persecution/discrimination based solely upon faith alone, thus allowing greater freedom expression than ever before seen regionally. Prior arrival foreign conquerors led none other than great Genghis himself. In 1237, the Mongol Empire began its conquest of Russia. The Mongols quickly conquered most of what is now modern-day Ukraine and Belarus before moving into western Russia in 1240. In a series of campaigns over the next few years, they captured Moscow, Novgorod, and other major cities, as well as much smaller towns throughout northern Europe. By 1245, all Russian principalities had been subjugated by the Mongols, with only one exception, Pskov, which held out until it was finally taken in 1301 after an 8-year siege. The impact that this period had on Russian society was immense. Not only did it bring about political changes, but also cultural ones too, such as introducing new religions, Islam, to some areas, or allowing for increased trade between East Asia and Europe via Silk Road routes through Mongolia itself. Furthermore, many aspects of traditional life were altered due to taxation policies imposed upon them by their conquerors, including serfdom becoming more widespread than ever before, while at the same time providing protection from outside invaders like Teutonic Knights who sought control over parts Eastern European lands during late Middle Ages era. Finally, there are still traces left today from these times, both positive, eagerness towards foreign cultures/ideas, negative, ethnic cleansing. In 1221, the Mongol Empire invaded India and quickly conquered much of northern India. The Mongols were led by Genghis Khan's grandson Chagatai, who had been appointed as governor-general in charge of Indian affairs. He was accompanied by a large army which included many experienced warriors from Central Asia and China. After conquering Delhi, they moved southwards towards Gujarat, where they encountered stiff resistance from local rulers but eventually managed to subdue them too. In 1241, the Mongols reached Bengal, where their forces clashed with those of Sultan Nasiruddin Mahmud Shah, 1246–66. Despite being outnumbered 3-1, the Mongol forces emerged victorious due to superior tactics and strategy employed by Subudai Bahadur, an able general under Chagatai's command, resulting in a decisive victory for them at Bathinda on April 5 that year. This marked the end of Muslim rule over North India until 1526, when Babur established Mughal dynasty there after defeating Ibrahim Lodi at Panipat battleground near Delhi. The next major campaign undertaken against Hindu kingdoms occurred during Kublai Khan's reign between 1280 to 1300 CE, when he sent his armies into South India via sea route along Malabar coastline. These campaigns resulted in conquest and annexation several small states such as Pandya Kingdom located around modern-day Madurai city, while other larger ones like Hosla Empire based out Karnataka region remained independent, albeit paying tribute regularly or providing military assistance whenever required. So long it lasted till 1343 AD before falling prey internal strife among its ruling family members, leading eventual downfall. Same time period also saw emergence powerful Vijayanagara kingdom, founded 14th century ruler Harihara Raya, whose successors would go on to become most influential power southern part country up mid 16th century AD. During later half 14th century, Tamerlane made 2 attempts invade Deccan Plateau, first failed miserably, second however successful, although only temporarily, since soon afterwards defeated combined force Rajput kings commanded Rana Kumbamur, present-day Udaipur district, state Rajasthan. Chapter 10 of the History of the Mongol Empire by John Mann focuses on the rise and fall of Genghis Khan's empire in East Asia. It begins with a brief overview of how Genghis unified Mongolia, then goes into detail about his conquests across Central Asia and China. After establishing control over these regions, he divided them among his sons to rule as khanates or provinces under one overarching authority, that is, himself. He also created an efficient system for governing which included taxation systems based on religion, Islam, and language, Mongolian. This allowed him to maintain order while expanding further eastward towards Korea and Japan. However, both countries were able to resist invasion due largely in part to their geography, making it difficult for large armies like those used by Mongols at this time period traverse through mountains or cross seas/rivers without proper ships/boats, etc. The chapter continues discussing other aspects such as trade routes established during this era between Europe and Middle East all the way up until Far East, where goods from Silk Road would be exchanged along with ideas and culture leading some historians believe was responsible for Renaissance occurring centuries later back West Side world. Finally, author concludes section noting decline Mongol power after death Kublai Khan 1294, when various factions began fighting each other, weakening once powerful dynasty, eventually fading away completely. 14th century, leaving behind legacies still seen today in many parts Eurasia including Russia, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, Tibet, Nepal, Bhutan, Myanmar, Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, Brunei, Singapore, Timor-Leste, Papua New Guinea, Solomon Islands, Fiji, Vanuatu, Samoa, Tonga, Cook Islands, Niue, Tuvalu, Marshall, Micronesia, Palau, Nauru, Kiribati, Hong Kong, Macau, Taiwan, South Korea, North Korea, Japan, Mongolia itself. Chapter 11 of the History of the Mongol Empire by John Mann focuses on the decline and eventual fall of this once powerful empire. After Genghis Khan's death in 1227, his sons divided up their father's vast domain into 4 khanates: Golden Horde, Russia, Ilkhanate, Persia/Iraq, Chagatai Khanate, Central Asia, and Yuan Dynasty China. Each was ruled independently but still paid tribute to a great Khan based at Karakoram or later Beijing. However, over time these divisions weakened as each ruler sought more autonomy from one another while also facing internal struggles for power within their own domains, leading to civil wars between rival factions that further fragmented them even further until they were eventually conquered by outside forces such as Russia, Persia, and Ming Dynasty China respectively during late 14th century early 15th centuries AD period known as the Age of Turmoil. This marked an end not only for Mongol rule but also its unique culture, which had been spread across Eurasian continent through military conquests under Genghis leadership before it ultimately faded away with passage time, leaving behind few traces today except some place names like Mongolia itself derived from Mongol Ulus, meaning great nation founded him back then. Chapter 12 of the History of the Mongol Empire by John Mann focuses on how the legacy and impact left behind by Genghis Khan's empire has been felt throughout history. It begins with a discussion about how, despite its short lifespan, 1206 to 1368, it was one of the most influential empires in world history due to its vast size and influence over many different cultures. This is followed up with an examination into some specific aspects that made this possible, such as their military tactics which allowed them to conquer so much land, their religious tolerance which enabled people from all backgrounds to live together peacefully, and finally, their economic policies which helped create wealth for both rulers and citizens alike. The chapter then goes on to discuss various ways in which these legacies have continued even after the fall of Mongolia itself, through artworks depicting scenes from battles or everyday life during those times, through literature written at that time describing events or customs associated with Mongols, but also more recently via films like Mongol directed by Sergei Bodrov Jr., books like Jack Weatherford's Genghis Khan and The Making of Modern World, etc. Finally, there are reflections upon what lessons can be learned today from studying this period, namely understanding why certain societies were able to succeed while others failed when faced similar challenges posed by globalization/expansionism, etc. In conclusion, although brief compared other great civilizations before it, the Mongol Empire still managed to leave behind a lasting impression not only within Asia but across entire globe, thanks largely due powerful leadership under Genghis Khan combined innovative strategies employed his successors,